Welcome to the AthleteEngine podcast, where we talk with amateur and professional athletes from a broad variety of sports. We're sitting down with our AthleteEngine members and asking them to share their training tips, recruiting experiences, and athletic successes. To kick things off, here's your host, Matt Trent.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AthleteEngine Weekly Podcast. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, professional race car driver Dan Conway. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. It's great to be here.
Dan, thanks again for joining us. I want to get in first and talk a little bit about your background. Obviously, you're in racing. I'd love to hear how you got started in racing. I know that it started at a young age in terms of being a spectator, and then you progressed through. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in racing and what was that original driver?
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad used to race about 15 years ago when I lived up in Spokane, Washington. He won a couple of races out in the series called the ICSCC. And I was a fan of watching it, but I never really got into actually driving myself until about 9 years ago. We went to the 24 Hours of Daytona just for fun, and I got down there and I got drawn into this passion. I got to see all the drivers and all the teams and meet people, and it was such an amazing experience that I just got drawn into it as a passion. And I decided to try and pursue it. So when I got back from that, I started doing some go-kart racing here and there, wherever we could afford to do it. And then as my senior year in high school rolled around, we were assigned a senior project. A lot of people did building stuff for the school or community service type things, but I decided to try and get professionally licensed to race cars. So I got a sponsor from one of the kids in my school's parents to pay for me to do the Skip Barber racing school to get licensed. This was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. So I did this school at Lime Rock Park with Skip Barber Racing, and while I was there, I actually just happened to coincidentally meet Enzo Colicchio, who is the team owner for 8-Star Motorsports. His, at the time, fiance was going through the program at the same time as I was, and we met, and I had been a big fan of himself and the team he raced for, Star Works Motorsports at the time. And I kind of just, talked with him, chatted with him over the course of the weekend, and he just kind of grew a liking for me and for my passion that I had, my desire to compete and to win, and my integrity and all that kind of things. And over the course of the next 6 or 8 months or so, our relationship grew. I came down and did a lot of, hanging out with him at races and stuff, and he started his team then 8-Star Motorsports that year, and I got to talk with them, and he basically decided to sponsor me for the Skip Barber Mazda Speed Challenge that year because he liked my drive and he wanted to see me succeed.
To build a relationship with Enzo and for Enzo to take interest in you, obviously that was really really important, and you obviously impressed Enzo to get to that point with him.
Yeah, and it was a great relationship. He's he's an amazing human being with great integrity, and he sponsored me for that year in Skip Barber, and then a little bit after that, he offered me a deal to race in one of his prototypes at Sebring, which was a great experience to actually get behind the wheel of an 8-Star Motorsports prepared car, and yeah, so it was a great opportunity. I've had a great relationship with Enzo, and I got to meet a lot of awesome people and do a lot of awesome things with that team.
So was it an 8-Star? Is that at the point where you met AthleteEngine co-founder Sean Rahal?
Yes. So actually, I met him just before I raced at Sebring because he was living in Mooresville, North Carolina, which is about 30 minutes north of of where I currently live in Belmont, North Carolina, and we happened to be just going to a go-kart race at the same time. And I met him there. I knew who he was because I had been a fan of racing. He didn't know who I was, but we met there. We hit it off. We became friends. And then it just happened that about 4 weeks later, we were both racing for 8-Star Motorsports at Sebring. And we've raced multiple times together since then. He's been a great friend and a great coach to me on my professional racing career.
So you mentioned Sebring, and I'm sure that had to have been amazing to race Sebring. I mean, just the history behind that venue and that track. What did that feel like, Dan, to get all four wheels on that racetrack?
Yeah, it was the most amazing experience of my life for sure. People get asked often, what their favorite track in the world is or whatever, and people often say like Daytona or Le Mans or whatever, but mine is one of my favorite tracks is Sebring. Just because of, like you said, the history and the races and the fact that it's kind of like an old school feeling track. It's an amazing place, amazing atmosphere, and just to kind of get there and show up and see my name on the side of our prototype race car, right next to a 8-Star Motorsports sticker was the best feeling in the world.
Maybe you can share with us some of the different leagues you've raced in, because you've been in some different organizations. You've raced different types of cars. Obviously, you've mentioned prototype lights. Did I say that right? Was it prototypes or prototype lights?
Mm-hmm. It was prototype lights.
Okay, prototype lights.
So I started in the Skip Barber Racing Series. That's where Enzo first kind of placed me when we were kind of working out where we should start and go from. So he put me in the Skip Barber Mazda Speed Challenge, where we race identically prepared Mazda MX-5 Cup cars. So I did that first season, raced against some great names like Kenton Cook, who just won the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona about 6 weeks ago, and finished fifth in the championship there in my first year ever in a race car. And the next year, Enzo put me into a team called APR Motorsports, where we ran 2 races in what was then called the Grand Am Continental Tire Sports Car Championship, which later got renamed to the IMSA, International Motorsports Association. And the next year, that's when I ran in IMSA in the prototype lights car. And then since then, I've been running in SCCA, which is the Sports Car Club of America. So those are the 4 main ones: the Skip Barber Racing Series, the Grand Am Series, IMSA, and the Sports Car Club of America. So
people that aren't quite as familiar with racing, prototype lights cars, what's the fastest that you've ever driven a prototype lights car?
Let's see. Prototype lights cars top out with their top speed at about 160 miles an hour, which is fast, but it's not necessarily what makes prototype lights cars great.
Okay.
What makes prototype lights cars great cars is that they produce a very significant amount of downforce compared to the weight. They're only about 1,250 pounds, which is extremely light for a race car. And allows them to get really fast in the corners. So while we're hitting only about 160 miles an hour in a straight line, we're doing turn 1 at Sebring at about 125 miles an hour. If you ask Sean Rahal, it's 128 miles an hour, but for most people, most mortal people, it's about 125 miles an hour. So that's what makes those cars great. They're so fast in the corner. They produce so much grip. And it's just an incredible car to drive. Yeah, again, for the non racing fans or folks that maybe aren't quite as familiar with racing, these are I've seen these cars firsthand, and they're just amazing. They're just amazing machines, and I think probably what's even more amazing is just the folks like Dan who drive these cars. It's just incredible. Dan. You're in a situation where I think you may be the first AthleteEngine member that I've had personal conversations with that are balancing college and racing cars at the same time. And you're in a very unique program. You were telling me about it earlier in college. And I'd love for you to share with the audience
the program and then some of the folks that you've been involved in with this program. So if you could start with the school and the program and give an overview, I think people would find this pretty incredible.
Yeah, sounds good. So I am a graduating senior currently at Belmont Abbey College. It's just south of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a really small town called Belmont. And it's a small 4-year private liberal arts college that has a program called Motorsports Management, which is, I believe, one of only 2 or 3 programs like that in the country. It's in its 9th or 10th year now. And they actually have, what makes the program really amazing is we have actual, industry professionals as professors for the program. You know, we have people like Tom Cotter, who used to own the largest PR company in NASCAR for about 20 years. He's one of the professors there. We have Jeremy Lang, who's the vice president at Levine Family Racing, which is a NASCAR Sprint Cup Series team. We have people like Pat Wood and Pat Stack, who are other amazing motorsports professionals, and they basically have the sort of in-industry level of experience that I think a lot of college programs these days unfortunately lack, where they have educated but not necessarily experienced professors, whereas this program offers a very high level of in-industry experience, and it's a great program altogether.
So you're a senior, you're graduating in May, and you've been there for 4 years. The kids that you've gone to school with, the fellow students that you've gone to school with, talk a little bit about, are any of those folks driving right now? Are they racing cars as well?
Yeah, so one other student, I believe, that I can think of off the top of my head, Myatt Snyder, he's one of my fellow peers at school. Him and I both race. He's a NASCAR driver. He races in the Cars Pro Tour Series. But him and I are really the only 2 racers I can think of off the top of my head who are currently actually actively racing. But it's an interesting, thing to try and balance school and racing. And it's also, I'm currently working an internship where I work about 20 to 25 hours a week at a company called Fuel Sports Management. And so it's just, it's hard to try and, balance internship with school with being gone, about 1 weekend a month or whatever for, missing days at school for racing or for testing. And, when I was at Sebring, I'm missing 5 days, to be down at Sebring. And it's hard to balance, but I think it's one of those things where if you set your mind to it and you're dedicated enough, you can, plan ahead and you can get done what you got to get done.
Well, obviously, you're a very dedicated and focused individual. You couldn't have gotten to this point in your career in life, Dan, without being that way. So it's very impressive.
Thank you.
I know there's a cause that's near and dear to your heart, the Juvenile Rheumatoid Arthritis organization. Can you talk a little bit about that and your experiences and your relationship with that organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was, in 2nd grade, I was diagnosed with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which unfortunately there's a really big sort of misconception, public misconception that arthritis is only something that, older people get kind of. But it's not like that at all. In fact, there's a large percentage of arthritis patients who are actually, young children, like myself when I was, back then. And it's basically a disease. It's a disease that attacks your joints and makes it very difficult to perform any sort of physical task. And I had that for about 4 years. I've been in remission now for about 8 or 10 years. But it's something that I'm really passionate about because it affected me, and it's one of those things where it affects so many children, but it kind of goes below the radar. And it's something that I'd like to sort of bring more awareness to and make more of a sort of public knowledge thing that it does affect children, and it makes children's lives very hard. In fact, when I lived in Washington State and I had JRA, I went to a hospital called Shriners Hospitals for Children, which provides free pediatric care to children. And that's another sort of charity that I'm really passionate about. In fact, I held a charity go-karting race to benefit Shriners about 2 years ago, where he raised almost $2,000.
Wow.
For the charity, and that was another great sort of experience and memory that I have to try and just give back to this place that was able to really make my life so much better for the years that I was inflicted with this disease.
I'll tell you, Dan, it's inspiring, and you are very similar to other folks in AthleteEngine. I'm just amazed by these stories, and we've started this podcast series, and there's just, and I say this to people, I don't know if we're just fortunate that that we've got some really great individuals in AthleteEngine, but we've got folks that are members that not only compete, but also work with kids, work with charitable organizations, just do a lot. They give a lot back in addition to receiving. So it's great to hear about the things that you're doing and what you care about, and that's always important, and it's very impressive.
Thank you,
Dan. Let's shift a little bit and let's talk about, obviously, one of the main drivers behind us starting AthleteEngine was to help athletes and build their brand, build their image, work with sponsors, because there's always a financial component to people participating in sports and working hard to realize their dreams and goals. Can you talk a little bit about current sponsors you have, and then we'll turn to potential sponsorship opportunities you might have as well?
Yeah. So my main current sponsor is a podiatry office in Ohio called Braun Foot and Ankle. They've been a great partner of mine for about 3 years now. They've been great friends, great people up there, and they're just one of those sort of small, down to earth, family run doctor's offices, and they've been a great partner. They've allowed me to do a lot of great things in the racing world. I'm also very happy to have people like the team I currently race for, Meathead Racing, providing some support and some preparation on the race car for me, and having great manufacturer involvement from people at Mazda Motorsports. They provide great cars and great great support and contingency sponsorship and awards and stuff depending on where you finish. So yeah, we between Braun Foot and Ankle, Meathead Racing, and Mazda Motorsports, we have some great partners and some great sponsors there who really help us get to the track every weekend.
Your thoughts on sponsorships and maybe what opportunities exist out there for a sponsor or a company that might be interested in working with you?
Yeah, so we have some great connections in the motorsports world with some great teams and stuff within the IMSA Prototype Lights ranks and within the IMSA Continental Tire Sports Car Challenge ranks. So, my goal is always to get back into that professional racing level. And I think between the sort of, business-to-business opportunities and the opportunities we have with some teams, we can provide some great marketing opportunities for sponsors and prototypes or in the Continental Tire Series.
The opportunities, do they exist with logos on fire suits, the helmets, cars? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, one of the main things that come with any sponsorship is you're going to get the logo visibility on driver suits, on clothes, hats, and then on the race car itself, and banners and all that kind of stuff at the track. But I think one of the main things that goes often unnoticed in sponsorships is the sort of behind the scenes, the efforts, the social media interactions, the publicity that goes on sort of behind the scenes. Anybody can put a sticker on a race car, but I know a lot of sponsors, including my partners, are more sort of interested in what goes on with the behind the scenes social media efforts, the business to business interactions they can have because of their involvement in a series or in a team or whatever. And I think that's sort of some of the great aspects of motorsports that you don't necessarily get in some of the other places, other sports where you can where you can sponsor, is you get this great access to everybody else.
Sure.
that you don't necessarily get in some other sports.
Well, I'll tell you, just you're such an impressive guy to talk to, and the way in which you carry yourself and communicate. I'd encourage any company or individual out there are interested in getting into motorsports and sponsorship in particular, to take a look at Dan, having been an individual who's done sponsorships in motorsports. Dan's an impressive guy, and we've been fortunate from an AthleteEngine perspective to just be surrounded with some really great people, and Dan's definitely on that list of people. So I encourage all of you to reach out. Dan, what's the best way, aside from your AthleteEngine profile, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they have an interest?
Yeah, so aside from through the AthleteEngine profile, you can get in touch with me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Dan Conway Racing. That's DanConwayRacing, Dan Conway Racing. On Facebook through the same link, or through my email address. You can email me at dan@danconwayracing.com.
Sounds great. And for the listeners out there, we will include this information when we on AthleteEngine itself, and then also on our Twitter feed. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about the racing that you're doing, the type of racing that you're doing now? We've talked about prototype lights and some of those things. You're doing something a little bit different right now. Obviously, you're balancing college and racing. Can you talk about the existing racing that you're doing?
Yeah, so right now for 2016, I'll be racing in the SCCA Sports Car Club of America Mid-Atlantic Series. I'll be racing a 1991 Mazda Miata with a team called Meathead Racing. So we'll be doing about 10 or 12 races with them. But obviously the goal, is to get back into the IMSA professional level ranks and out of the prototype light series or the Connell Tire Sports Car Challenge series.
And I got to ask you this question. So what's on your iPhone, or what do you listen to before you go out on the track when you're getting ready to go?
That is a great question. So my sort of top pre-race music choice, hands down, no question, Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
That's my sort of go-to, get pumped up, get amped up, ready to go music. I've always been a Led Zeppelin fan, so I got a whole playlist just for them for my pre-race. I get ready for pre-race.
All right, I'm a huge Zeppelin fan. So what are you rocking? Are you rocking like Cashmere before you go out, or?
Let's see. I got some Battle of Evermore and Misty Mountain Hop.
That says a lot about you. You have great taste in music.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Been joined by Dan Conway on today's show, and I want to thank Dan for joining us today and telling his story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a great time.
You've been listening to the AthleteEngine podcast, hosted by Matt Trent. If you are an athlete, coach, recruiter, or fan, be sure to check out AthleteEngine.com, where you can connect with athletes around the world. Our podcast is available on our social network at AthleteEngine.com, as well as on iTunes. You can always find previous episodes of the podcast in the archives section. Join us next week as we feature another AthleteEngine member and hear their stories of success.